welcome to another edition of Nain's Shorts, talking about training and all the stuff we think about, but don't always say out loud because, well, we're kind of strange that way, and not everybody else trains as much as we do. But do we really train that much, and how much of that is seen in our real lives? Now, we talk about being lifers when it comes to martial arts. At least I do definitely say that I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life. My exercises consist of flexibility training and making sure that my joints are strong and mobile. So as I get older, I'm still able to do a lot of what I'm doing. So I'm definitely focused on that concept. But here's the thing that we've been thinking about lately, and is how much of our martial art actually bleeds into our everyday life. Now, it's a simple concept. It's the idea that if we can incorporate our martial arts into our everyday life, then it's there all the time and ready for us to use whenever we need to, because that's what we train for, right? For self defense, we train for the real world. And if we only leave it in the classroom, if we only do our training and thinking in the classroom when it comes to martial arts, are we truly living that life? Are we truly living the martial arts in our everyday life? Now, I'm sure there are many points to be said in reference to this. I think the first one we should address would be the character building, the type of individual you become through the training of martial arts. Now, let me emphasize, for me, it's less about the art in particular that develops you into that person as it is the people that are teaching you. Because you can have the most positive ideas in your martial art and the history behind it and all of that that goes into it and the discipline and whatnot. But if the person that's teaching you these things is a complete and utter a-hole, is it more likely that you're just going to emulate that a-hole and use whatever reasonings to justify the way that you behave? I don't see it just in martial arts. I see it in many facets in life. So that's why I had to bring that up, because it is really the character building in the individual that will emulate the positive that comes with the martial arts and the character that you build because of it. So that's one aspect that I think we can definitely talk more about, but that's not what I'm referring to today. I'm talking about the practical sense of martial arts. More often than not, we hear from different martial artists and instructors that, hey, here's what I have to teach you. Now take it with you, make it your own, and that's it. First of all, we may not know how to make it our own. We may not know how to question whether or not what we've just shown has any validity. Can we make it work, first of all? Well, even before that, do we even understand what it is that we just were taught? How does it work outside of this realm, this class, this particular forum? Can it work other outside of that? And if it can, how? How do we get to that point where we are able to do so? And that takes questioning. That requires you to break it apart and really add all the knowledge that you have along with you in order to see, okay, well, it wouldn't work because of this, but if I change this aspect of it or this particular idea, well, now it might work 60% of the time in this instance. And the point is to eventually get it so it works as much as possible and as close to 100% as you possibly can. And I emphasize as close to 100% because the reality is, when we are fighting somebody that isn't in our class, that is trying to cause us harm, we don't know what they know. We don't know how strong they are, how fast they are, until it begins. And at that point, all you have is your training. So if your training is enough for that, great. If it isn't, well, back to the drawing board, and what else do we have that we can supplement or train or add that is going to help out in that situation that you may never be in again. sorry folks, martial arts is training for the worst case scenario and hoping that it never ever happens. We talk about it all the time. Just avoid the situation altogether. That may be part of the training that you're lacking, being able to acknowledge that you're emotionally compromised and you need to get the hell out of that situation. But let's stay to the actual physical stuff. And for us, or at least the way I was trained, the physical stuff is mostly predicated on the understanding of what you're trying to accomplish. And often, actually more often than not, the physical stuff you learn in class, the movements, don't actually translate very well into a real life situation. First and foremost, that individual doesn't know what you know and the rest of your classmates know. So the way they will attack you isn't necessarily going to be the way that you know or are used to. That straight punch, that haymaker a certain way, or even the angle 1 and 2 for most Filipino martial artists. It's not the same way. The way we strike isn't even the same way that most other martial or Filipino martial artists strike, because, well, we have a different mentality behind it, and we've explained that before on these videos. So again, if that person isn't giving you what you're used to, will that stuff work? And if not, what would? And oftentimes I find it that it's the concepts, the ideas that you use in your fighting that then translate outside of the class itself. And that's what I was focusing on in this particular conversation that I've had with Rick and some other students, was where do you see those concepts in your real life? Well, first of all, are you even looking for those concepts, for them to come up in different forms? Like, for example, the idea of misdirection. Have you ever been to a magic show? Have you ever seen a street performer? They use it all the time. The idea of getting you to see one thing while their other hand is doing something else. Pickpockets. If you travel abroad, they do the same thing. They distract you with one thing or something flashy, and then they take your shit out of your pockets. Now, I know those seem like very kind of out of the way and far-fetched examples, but you see it in professional fighting all the time. Misdirection. I'm going to do this series of moves to get you to guard a certain way, and then I'm going to switch it up and get the knockout, or get a very good impact where you wince and you change, or you're just in so much pain, then everything else is going to connect and you win the fight. You see it all the time, but do we see it in our everyday life? And I'm not talking about going to a magic show every single day. I'm talking about while you're walking down the street. Do you realize, oh, my vision was obstructed, so I missed half of what was going on in front of me, and I almost ran into somebody. I was distracted by something going on over here, so I almost crashed into somebody over on my left. Things like that happen all the time, but we don't associate them to martial arts because, well, first of all, we might have nearly just crapped ourselves from being in a motor vehicle collision, but beyond that, we're not thinking in terms of martial arts. So can we say we are lifers if we don't start looking for our concepts and ideas in the real world? Now, this came about because, well, Rick likes to play poker. He's a gambler. You should reach out to him and maybe we have an intervention. No, he's not that bad. But he was in a situation where he was doing it virtually, and at one point he could not see his cards because somebody walked away from the table and their avatar covered the table. So he could no longer see his cards. So he didn't know what to do, whether to bet, whether to raise, whether to fold. So he was at a loss in that situation, and all of a sudden, bam, his odd brain started associating to the idea that he saw 6 years ago from another martial artist that we know that was doing a seminar. And that triggered all these other ideas that could possibly happen in reference to actual conflict and fighting. And it really changed the dynamic of how we looked at things. From there, it evolved into a question of what we do. Will what we do actually work? And the reality of it is it won't. Why? Because we don't carry sticks out in the real world. Because even if we did carry sticks out in the real world, or everybody carried bladed weapons out in the open and dueling was a thing, and we happened to come across it regularly in our everyday lives, that person would not strike you the way you're used to being struck in class. So again, will it actually work? And in order to question that, you have to figure out what would. Even though you're doing the same move, what has to change in order for that move to actually be effective? And the reality is that you have to go beyond the actual drill itself and focus on what it is you're doing to the opponent. And that goes back to the concepts and ideas such as making them look one way and hitting them the other, which is a distraction, which is manipulation, whatever you want to call it, whatever it's called in your school, but those are the things that are going to make that work. So are we really looking for that sort of thing in our real lives? Because I don't know about you, I have a job. I can't be in the gym 4 hours a day. I can't be there 8 hours a day, 6 days a week with 1 day of rest. I wish I could. Don't get me wrong. I would love to train every single day for as long as I possibly can and then come back the next day and do it all over. And one day I hope I can. I hope that I figure shit out and I'm able to do that. But right now it's not possible. So how do we keep the martial arts alive so the mind is constantly thinking of those things, even though we can't walk around in real life Judy chopping everybody as we come along? Somebody tries to give you a hug, we're not going to redirect them and then put them in a chokehold. Somebody is about to bump into you, so you just stiffen up your shoulders so they fall over. Like, again, you'd be a complete and utter asshole to go around and doing that. And if that's the kind of person you're learning from, well, then maybe that is in your wheelhouse. But for me, that's not feasible. So I have to start thinking of different ways to incorporate the martial arts into my real world beyond trying to turn off my lights in my house with my toes. Anyone who's done kicking knows exactly what I'm talking about. Anyone who's trained long enough knows that they've tried it at some point in their life. And yes, I still try to do that, and I even do it when opening the door and other things of that nature. But is that really enough? Or do we really have to start diving deep into what makes our martial art truly work outside of the dojo, outside of the mat, and that is seeing the concepts, understanding them, and then associating what we do in real life with what we do on the mat? And will that strengthen our martial arts to the point where we're constantly thinking this way, so when we do find ourselves in a situation where we don't know what that person knows, we don't know how strong, how fast, or how skilled they are, our minds are constantly looking for the solutions outside of the movements that we've practiced over and over again. And then all of a sudden, those moves will work against somebody that doesn't know how to punch the way our classmates do. Just a thought, just an idea. Tell me what you think. How do you guys incorporate martial arts into your real world? And has it been effective? Has it been tested? Unfortunately, for most of us, it hasn't. For some of us, it has. And I would love to hear both sides of that conversation. So thank you for joining me on another one of Nain Shorts. Like, subscribe, share, and I'll see you on the next one. Till then, 3, 2, 1, cut!